I wasn't waiting up for her, that's the first thing. I was running a routine audit on a vendor account. The kind of thing I do after midnight when the hospital network is quiet and nobody is asking me questions. And the apartment was dark except for my screen. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago and I hadn't noticed. Then the front closet opened. Gym bag zipper. Sandra came through the hallway in street clothes at 2 a.m., bag over her shoulder, moving like a woman with somewhere to be. I looked up from the screen. She looked at me and said it flat, no preamble. "You don't own me. I'll be back when I feel like it." I nodded once, went back to the screen. The door clicked shut behind her. Not a slam. That careful quiet of someone who is not actually sorry, but doesn't want a scene. I sat there and listened to her footsteps on the stairs, then nothing. I picked up the cold coffee, set it back down. 40 seconds, maybe. I opened a new browser tab. Something switched over in me at that moment. I can't describe it better than that. The man who had been sitting in the dark, feeling the particular weight of a bad marriage, just went somewhere else. And another man sat down in the same chair. Same posture, different eyes. I knew what the gym bag meant. I knew what 2 a.m. meant. I didn't need to follow her, I needed to think. I went to work. By 3 a.m. I had what I needed to start. By 4 a.m. I had printed one page and was already pulling on my jacket. I texted Dale. He was in Columbus, 90 minutes out. And I knew he'd come because he always comes, and because some part of him had been waiting for this call longer than I had. I drove to the Meadfield Road grain elevator lot and parked and waited. Dale's Ram rolled in just after 6, headlights going dark before he even stopped fully. He climbed out in a canvas jacket and work boots, the Ohio cold coming off him, and he leaned against the driver's door and looked at me. "What do you need?" he said. "A week and a witness." He took the printed page from my hand. Cell carrier location data pulled through my own account. Sandra was on my plan. 14 nights, same 2-hour window, give or take 15 minutes. Same cell tower on the east side of Chillicothe, half a mile from an address I'd already looked up on the county property records site. The address belonged to a man named Greg Patton. Dale read it again, looked at me. "Okay," he said. The corn was already cut. Brown fields on both sides of the road, the grain elevator throwing a long shadow west in the early light. And somewhere back in the dark off the county road, a screen door was banging in the wind. I folded the page in half and put it in my jacket pocket like a receipt I was going to need later. We stood there a minute, not talking. That's one of the things about Dale. He knows when not to talk. "You eatin'?" he said finally. "No? I'll make eggs." We drove back to Caldwell Avenue in separate vehicles, and I followed his taillights the whole way, watching the rosary swing on his mirror every time he braked. My name is Ray Kowalski. I'm 52 years old. I work network security at Adena Regional Medical Center, have for 11 years, and my job is basically to think like someone trying to break into a system so I can close the door before they get there. I run penetration tests, audit vendor accounts, look for the gap between what people think is secure and what actually is. It's patient work. It's also, I've found, good training for situations that have nothing to do with computers. Sandra is 49. She's a case supervisor at Ross County Human Services, 14 years in. She's organized, she has a long memory, and she is very good at building a narrative. I respected that about her for most of our marriage. I still respect it, technically. I just understand it better now. We had been married 22 years. We lived in a second-floor, 2-bedroom apartment above an insurance storefront on Caldwell Avenue, which I will admit is a detail that's going to become ironic pretty fast. The kitchen always smelled like burned coffee and old arguments. The bedroom had a silence that got comfortable around year 15 and never got uncomfortable again. I'd been sleeping on the couch so long, I'd started to think of it as my side of the bed. There was a crack in the lower left corner of the bathroom mirror. I kept meaning to replace it. Sandra stopped noticing it 3 years ago. At some point, that becomes a metaphor, but I'm not going to say it out loud. The morning after she left, Dale made eggs over easy and biscuits and gravy at my apartment stove. Both of us in yesterday's clothes, him still in his boots. He talked about a job he'd driven to Dayton last week, a pallet of HVAC parts for a warehouse off 75, how the loading dock smelled like a middle school gymnasium. He couldn't figure out why, it just did. I laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, first time in I don't know how long. It lasted about 90 seconds, and then we ate in silence, and it was enough. "More gravy?" Dale said. Yeah. He spooned it over. We ate. Outside, Caldwell Avenue was doing its morning thing. A truck idling, someone's radio, the insurance office downstairs unlocking its door. Normal sounds. I sat in them and ate my eggs, and didn't think about the printed page in my jacket for a full 8 minutes, which was probably the healthiest 8 minutes of that week. At work, I have a licensed data broker tool we use for vendor background checks. I also have access to standard forensic software for network analysis. I want to be clear about something. I didn't use anything I shouldn't have. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break into accounts that weren't mine to access. What I did was remember that Sandra and I had set up a shared cloud backup account in 2021 for tax documents. Joint account, both our names, both of us set it up together at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. She forgot about it. I didn't. I was at my hospital workstation, mid-morning, running a standard audit on a vendor account, when I opened a second tab and logged into the shared account. My phone buzzed. Sandra, you coming home for dinner tonight? I typed back, yes, put the phone down, kept pulling. That's the thing about a normal marriage going bad. The dangerous moments don't feel dangerous. They feel like Tuesday. The archive loaded. She'd created a folder called House Docs. It was not House Docs. It was 26 months of forwarded emails between Sandra and a man named Greg Patton, sales director at Buckeye Mutual Insurance out of Columbus. It started at a conference. It always starts at a conference. The emails were not passionate, which was somehow worse than if they had been. They were logistical, scheduling. He's working late. I can be there by 9. Call when you're on the road. The language of two people organizing a thing they have done many times and plan to keep doing. I read through them with the same attention I give a network audit. Methodical. Looking for the map, not the individual data points. And then, buried in the same archive, I found a thread between Sandra and a woman named Carol Voss, old colleague. And in that thread, 6 months back, this. He talked to Hensley, I know he did. I lost that promotion because of Ray. I stared at that line for a long time. 2016. Sandra had been up for a supervisor position at what was then Meridian County Human Services. She didn't get it. She came home that night and didn't speak for 3 days. And when she finally spoke, she told me she'd heard I'd made a call to her supervisor, a man named Hensley, and said something that undermined her application. I told her I hadn't. She told me I was a liar. We had a version of that argument, in various forms, for the next 8 years. I had never spoken to Hensley in my life. 2016 was my 3rd month at the hospital. I barely knew anyone's name yet. I was focused on learning the network architecture, surviving the learning curve, not making enemies. The idea that I'd have had both the motive and the connections to sabotage my wife's county job application was absurd to me then, and it's absurd to me now. But Sandra believed it. Or she decided to believe it. I was never sure which. I went to Rosie's Diner on Bridge Street for lunch and sat at the counter with a club sandwich I wasn't eating and my laptop open, and I pulled the 2016 employment records through the hospital's licensed data broker. Same tool I use for vendor checks, completely legal, running under my work credentials for a documented HR research query. I found the performance review trail from Sandra's employer. The note that flagged her application was a third-party reference comment, anonymized as required, but the submission metadata showed an email domain, buckeyemutual.com. I set down the sandwich. A waitress named Patrice came by and refilled my coffee without being asked. "You want the pie?" she said. "It's apple." "No thanks." She brought it anyway, set it down in front of me, no charge, moved on to the next stool without another word. I looked at the slice. I ate the whole thing. Greg Patton was at Buckeye Mutual in 2016. He and Sandra worked for adjacent county departments. He would have known her boss, Hensley. It would have been an easy call to make. A professional reference check, informal, a word in the right ear. And then 2 years ago, he started sleeping with her. Sandra spent 8 years being angry at me for something Greg Patton did. And Greg spent 8 years knowing it. I closed the laptop, sat with the empty pie plate. Outside on Bridge Street, a pickup went by with a load of fence posts. And somewhere down the block, somebody was raking leaves, that dry, papery sound. I paid the check and went out to the parking lot and called Lori Patton. I'd gotten her number through a contact at the school district, which I'll explain in a minute. She picked up on the second ring. "I think we're in the same situation," she said. Just like that, no hello. "I think you're right," I said. "Don't do anything yet." "How long?" "5 days, maybe less." "Okay." She hung up. Lori Patton was a third-grade teacher at Chillicothe City Schools, 12 years in the district. She was 47. She was calm the way still water is calm right before a current shows, and she had apparently been working her own investigation for the better part of 4 months. That night I went to Benny's on Paint Street with Dale. Wood-paneled sports bar, Bengals banner from 2003 that nobody has ever touched, the smell of old beer and fryer oil, and the specific comfort of a place that hasn't tried to be anything different in 20 years. Kay Marlowe set 2 Pabst Blue Ribbons on the bar without being asked. "You eating?" she said. "We already ate." "You look like you didn't." Dale said, "She's right." He ordered the cheeseburger. I ordered one too. We drank our Pabst and Dale turned on his stool to look at me. "You know," he said, "she might actually believe it, what she's been telling herself." "It doesn't matter what she believes," I said. "It matters to you. You just won't say so." I looked at my beer. "The eggs were good this morning." Dale picked up his glass and set it back down harder than he needed to. Not a slam, just weight applied with intention. "Yeah, they were," he said. "I make excellent eggs." We didn't talk about Sandra again that night. The burgers came. We ate them. On my way home from Benny's, I walked up Caldwell Avenue and noticed Dorothy Crane on her porch across the hall, sitting in her porch chair in the cold with a mug in her hands. She watched me come up the sidewalk. I noticed her noticing and kept walking. We didn't speak yet, but I felt her watching until I got inside. Back in the apartment, I went through Sandra's coat that was still on the hook by the door. Not because I expected to find anything, just thoroughness. Back pocket, wadded up. A hotel parking stub from Columbus, 6 weeks ago, validated stamp from Buckeye Mutual Insurance. The ink was a little faded, but the logo was clear enough. I held it under the bathroom light for a minute, set it on the edge of the sink and went to bed. Lay there on the couch, looking at the ceiling crack I'd been meaning to patch since March. It was not the worst night's sleep I'd had that week. That's the best I can say for it. In the morning, I called in a favor from a paralegal I knew through the hospital's legal department and got a name. Nora Stillwell, founding partner at Stillwell & Associates, 18 years in Chillicothe, known for being efficient, unsentimental, and about 4 moves ahead of whoever she was talking to at any given moment. Her conference room had a fluorescent tube that was going in the fixture overhead. One tube, slow flicker, the kind that should have been replaced 6 months ago. I sat across from her and laid out what I had. She read without speaking for 4 minutes. The tube flickered. I waited. "The defamation angle against Patton," she said. "It's real, but it's pursued separately from the divorce." "I don't care about the defamation angle." She set the papers down and looked at me. "Yes, you do," she said. "You care very much. That's why you're in my office at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday." I pushed back from the table. The chair scraped against the linoleum. "Sandra thinks she's been punishing me for 8 years," I said. "She doesn't know she was punishing me for something Greg Patton did." "Does that help her or hurt her?" Nora said. "That's not a legal question." "I know." She picked the papers back up and made a note in the margin. "The carrier location logs," she said. "Did you pull those through the hospital system?" "Through my own carrier account. She's on my plan." "That's clean." She made another note. "Community property schedule is going to be interesting given the retirement account contributions during the documented period. What does she get? Is that your question?" "Yes." "What she's entitled to." "Less than she was planning on. More than she deserves, depending on who you ask." That's an honest answer. I said, "Okay." That was enough for me. The next day, Dale drove up to Columbus. Not for a job. He pulled into the Buckeye Mutual parking garage at noon and found Greg Patton's silver Lexus ES350, which he'd identified from the partial plate on the location logs. And he leaned against the driver's door with his arms folded, and he waited. Greg came out at 12:15, saw Dale, stopped walking. Dale looked at the car, looked at Greg. "Nice car," Dale said. He walked away. That was it. That was the whole thing. But Dale is a large man with ex-Army posture and the specific calm of someone who has decided not to do the thing they are clearly capable of doing. And I understand that can communicate quite a lot without words. Dale told me about the sugar in the Lexus's gas tank the next morning. He was pouring coffee, very casual about it. Must be karma, he said. You put sugar in a man's gas tank, Dale. I said it was karma. I didn't say I did it. Okay. He handed me the coffee. I drank it. We had agreed, Dale and I, that we were not going to do anything that would hand Greg Patton a way out. No crimes. Nothing that shifted the focus. The point was not revenge on Greg Patton. The point was that Greg Patton had already done his own damage, and the only thing left was to make sure the right people knew it. The gas tank thing I filed under Dale being Dale, which is a category of event I've been managing since 1989. The Rosie's booth, 2 days later. Me and Dale on one side, Lori Patton across from us with a legal pad and a pen. She'd ordered black coffee. Dale and I both got eggs over easy. Lori set the legal pad flat on the table. She had neat handwriting, the kind you'd expect from a third-grade teacher, and the pad was half full. 6 months of hotel receipts, she said. 2 conference weekends with no corresponding events on Greg's company calendar. I checked the calendar through his assistant, asked about scheduling for a school fundraiser auction item. She was very helpful. Lori said this without expression. 1 credit card charge from a florist in Chillicothe that I did not receive flowers from. When was that? I said. 3 weeks before our anniversary. Dale looked at his eggs. He's been using my kid's college fund account as a float, Lori continued. He transfers money in within 30 days so it doesn't show as a net deficit on the statement. But I screenshot the intermediate states every Thursday morning. She turned the legal pad so I could see the column of figures. 19 weeks of screenshots. How long have you known? I said. I've been sure for 4 months. I've been suspecting for a year. Okay, Dale looked at Lori. You want eggs? She looked at him. I already ordered. That wasn't what I meant. Lori looked at the table for a second. I know, yes. She picked up her coffee. I want them to be scrambled. Dale flagged Patrice down. Scrambled eggs, please. Patrice wrote it down. Toast? Yes, Lori said. Wheat. We sat there while she waited for her eggs, and nobody talked for a minute, and it was the most companionable silence I'd had in a month. The Greg Patton 2016 situation I told Lori about straight, no softening. She listened with the legal pad open and her pen hovering, but she didn't write anything down. I suspected something like that existed, she said. I didn't know what it was specifically. Greg has a habit of helping people with their problems after he's created them. He thinks it reads as generous. Does Sandra know it was him? No, and I doubt Greg's told her. It would be the end of the thing. It's going to be the end of the thing anyway, I said. Lori's eggs came. She ate them. The ladies' auxiliary luncheon at First Methodist in Millhaven was Lori's idea. I want to give her full credit for that one. Beverly Patton, Greg's mother, was a founding member of the auxiliary, 74 years old, genuinely pious, and the kind of woman whose family name meant something to her in a way that was almost physical. The fall luncheon was a quarterly public event, open to community members, held in the church fellowship hall. Lori knew Beverly through family events. Dorothy Crane knew the auxiliary through her library connections. It was a natural enough attendance that nobody would notice. It was not a confrontation. It was a presence. Lori stood across the fellowship hall from Beverly Patton and didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Beverly was a mother who knew her son, and Lori was a wife with 19 weeks of Thursday morning screenshots and the specific expression of a woman who has decided. Beverly sat down slowly, stayed down for 20 minutes. Lori ate her lunch, drank her coffee, and let Dorothy introduce her to people as the Kowalski neighbor's attorney friend, which was not technically true, but was close enough. That afternoon, Beverly called Greg. I don't know exactly what was said. I know it lasted 40 minutes because Dale was tracking Greg's cell on the shared location app Lori had put on both their phones during a phone software update 8 months ago. She'd mentioned she needed to add him for the family plan, and he'd handed her the phone. 36 minutes of stationary in the Columbus office parking garage, which meant he went outside to take it and needed air. In Dale's Ram, driving back from Columbus that evening, I was in the passenger seat watching the fields go dark. You could end him with what you have, Dale said. I know, but you're not going to. Sandra's real fight was never with me. Dale drove. The rosary swung on the mirror every time we went over the railroad crossing at the edge of town. That's a very mature thing to say, Dale said, for a guy who hasn't slept in 4 days. I slept last night. 4 hours. Four's fine. He turned onto Caldwell Avenue, and I could see the light on in our apartment window from the street. I went upstairs. Sandra had been there. Her key was on the kitchen counter. She'd taken 2 suitcases and the Le Creuset Dutch oven we got for our 10th anniversary. The apartment smelled like her shampoo and the absence of it at the same time. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the key. It's a strange thing seeing a house key on a counter. It's such a small piece of metal, such a specific and final gesture. I stood there a while. Then I picked up my phone and called Dorothy Crane. Dorothy opened her door before I knocked. She had a printed photograph in her hand, regular paper, slightly grainy from a home printer, but clear enough. A silver Lexus, ES350, partial plate visible, parked on Caldwell Avenue at 2:20 a.m. on a specific Tuesday in September. The kind of photograph a retired reference librarian takes when she has noticed something and decided that noticing it is a civic responsibility. I liked your father, Dorothy said. He would have handled this differently. How would he have handled it? Loudly and badly. She stepped back to let me in. That's why I said your way's smarter. She had 11 dates written in a spiral notebook in her neat, retired librarian handwriting. 9 confirmed arrival times, the partial plate, 3 photographs total on her phone, the clearest one printed and in my hand. She offered tea. I accepted. We sat at her kitchen table while the tea steeped, and Dorothy told me what she'd seen over the past 3 months from her porch and her front window. And I held the photograph and felt the dry paper scratch of it. The specific weight of something that had been hidden being made physical and real. Does Sandra know you watch the street? I said. Sandra waves at me when she goes to her car, Dorothy said. She's always been pleasant. I'll miss the waving. Dorothy. I know. She poured the tea. She hurt a good man because someone else hurt her first. That doesn't make it right. It just makes it sad. I drank the tea and didn't say anything. Your father had a temper, Dorothy said, not unkindly. You got the other thing. What other thing? Patience. She set the teapot down. He always said that about you. Said you'd sit and wait out a problem until it turned into a solution. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just finished the tea. Back out in the hallway, I stood at my own apartment door for a second. Then I went in, sat at the desk, and opened the secondary monitor. Greg Patton's full email archive was there. I'd pulled it through a completely legal route, through the shared cloud backup that had Sandra's forwarded copies of her conversations with him, and through his own inadvertent CC-inging of her on 3 separate insurance board document threads. Personnel files. Client data exchanges that would not look good in a regulatory review. 3 separate conversations that had the unmistakable character of a man who has been quietly bending rules for years and has never been caught. My finger was over the send button. Forward to the Ohio Department of Insurance Oversight Office. Anonymous tip, clean, untraceable to me. I sat there a long time. Sandra's real enemy was never me. That one's not mine to take. I closed the laptop. Dale was asleep on the couch, boots off, jacket balled under his head. I got the blanket from the closet shelf and laid it over him and went to bed. The couch was his problem now. I slept 6 hours. The next morning, Nora texted at 6 a.m. Sandra's called my office twice this week asking if she needs representation. I told her I have a conflict. She doesn't know yet what the conflict is. I read it, put the phone face down on the nightstand, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. A man can build a very clean life, I have found, in the space between what he knows and what he does about it. I'd had 11 years of building that at the hospital. You find the gap, you understand the gap, and then you close it carefully and without drama, and you move on to the next one. Sandra had given me 8 years of the gap. One more thing to set up. I called Dorothy. Are you free around noon today? I said. I am. I need a favor. I know, she paused. I'll call Lori. Thank you, Dorothy. You're not going to be here, are you? No. Good, she said. That's the right move. I told Nora to be at the apartment at noon. I texted Lori the address she already had. I wrote the note and put it on the kitchen counter under Sandra's key. Then I spent 40 minutes doing essentially nothing. Washed my coffee cup, made the couch into a couch again, folded Dale's blanket, looked at the apartment, 22 years of furniture. Her reading lamp, my bookshelf, both of us mixed up in the everyday objects of a shared life in a way that doesn't separate cleanly. I wasn't sentimental about it. I was just aware of it, the way you're aware of a bruise when you press on it. I left the key where it was and went downstairs. Dale was already in the Ram with the engine running. He'd been up since 5, he said. He handed me a gas station coffee and pulled out onto Caldwell. "You sure you don't want to be there?" he said. "I'm sure. Most guys would want to see it." "I know what Sandra looks like when she realizes she's wrong," I said. "I've seen it twice in 22 years. I don't need a third." "What's it look like?" I thought about it. "Like she's reading a word she doesn't know how to pronounce." Dale nodded and drove. We got drive-through coffee at the Rosie's window and parked in the lot and waited. I didn't eat. Dale had a biscuit. He offered me half. I took it. "She's going to be furious," Dale said. "For a while. And then? And then she's going to have to figure out what to do with that note." Dale looked out the windshield at the Rosie's parking lot. A woman with a stroller was going in the front door. A teenage kid in a Bengals hoodie was on his phone by the newspaper boxes. Normal Wednesday in Chillicothe. "You still love her?" Dale said. "I loved who I thought she was for about 15 of those 22 years. "What changed at 15? "She stopped being who I thought she was." "What was she before that?" I looked at the Rosie sign. "Somebody who was wrong about me, but still gave me the benefit of the doubt." Dale ate the rest of his biscuit. We drank our coffees. The lot was quiet. At 12:17, Sandra came back. She had her key. She came in through the downstairs door and up the stairs the way she always did. The third step from the top giving its usual creak, and she opened the apartment door and walked in. Nora Stillwell was at the kitchen table with the divorce filing in a manila folder, her reading glasses on, a legal pad at her elbow. Dorothy Crane was on the couch with her 3 printed photographs and her spiral notebook, and her hands folded in her lap. Lori Patton was standing by the window with the October light behind her, not sitting, not moving, just there. Sandra stopped in the doorway. She looked at Nora, looked at Dorothy, looked at Lori. 3 women she connected to 3 different parts of her life, and she could not immediately build a sentence that covered all of them at once. I know because Dorothy told me later, and because I know Sandra. The note was on the counter under her key where she'd left it. It said, "I forgive you. Greg Patton is the one who cost you that job. Ask him." Sandra looked at the note, looked at Lori. Lori didn't move from the window. "What is this?" Sandra said. Nora said, "It's a filing. You have 30 days to respond. I can recommend counsel." Sandra looked at Dorothy. "I took that photograph myself," Dorothy said. "September 14th, 2:22 a.m. "You've been watching my house." "I watched the whole street, Sandra. I liked your husband's father. This seemed like the kind of thing he'd want someone to notice." Sandra looked at the note again. Her voice was lower when she said it. "What does that mean? Greg cost me the job." Lori said from the window, "It means in 2016, your husband never called Hensley. Greg did. I found the record. Your attorney will find it too." Sandra said, "That's not—" "I know," Lori said. "That's the problem." Sandra sat down. Not in defeat, in the specific way a person sits when the story they've been carrying for 8 years has just become something they can no longer navigate by the route they know. She set her keys on the table next to the divorce filing and looked at the note and didn't say anything for a long time. "Where is he?" she said. Nora said, "He didn't say." 3 days after the ladies' auxiliary luncheon, Greg came to the apartment. I should tell that part. He came the day before Sandra walked in, actually. The timeline matters. He'd heard through channels Dale was not particularly subtle about that someone had been near his office, and Beverly had made her call. Greg was a man who had been running a quiet double life for years, on the confidence of never having been caught at anything, and that confidence was beginning to crack in a specific and irreversible way. He knocked. I opened the door. He was trying to look controlled. He was not controlled. "I don't know what you think you have, but I know about 2016, Greg." A beat. A long one. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Hensley, the reference comment. BuckyEmutual.com. He went still the way a man goes still when he realizes The room has changed while he was talking. His mouth was open slightly, and he was trying to find the thread of the thing he'd come here to say, and it wasn't there anymore. I'm not going to do anything with it, I said. Sandra will, when she finds out. But that's between you two. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 20 seconds. I could hear him through the door. Not moving, not talking, just standing there with whatever a man like Greg Patton stands with when he finally understands that the thing he's been managing for 8 years has stopped being manageable. Then he left. I went to bed. At Meadfield Road, the grain elevator lot, the Ram sat on the gravel pull-off with the engine off and the window down. October air, cold and clean, the smell of cut corn and diesel, the fields brown on both sides. The same long shadow the elevator threw across the road. Same as it was in early morning a week ago, when Dale and I stood here with a printed page. I sat with my hands in my lap. I want to be honest about what I felt. I've been in this job long enough to know that finding the gap and closing the gap are not the same as feeling good about any of it. I found out my wife had been sleeping with another man. I found out the reason she'd spent 8 years being angry at me was that a third man had made a phone call he'd never told her about. I found out that the marriage I'd been trying to save was, in some structural sense, a marriage that had been undermined from the outside before Sandra and I had even finished wrecking it from the inside. None of that feels like winning. It just feels like true. She was going to spend the rest of her life figuring out what to do with that note, with the forgiveness she hadn't asked for, and maybe didn't think she deserved, and definitely didn't expect from a man she'd been punishing for 8 years, with the knowledge that the punishment had been aimed at the wrong person, and the right person had been in her bed for 2 years, and was right now, presumably, in a parking garage in Columbus, trying to explain something to his mother on the phone. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. Behind the truck, back up the road where the old houses sit set back from the gravel, a screen door creaked in the October wind. Same sound as my father's house on Caldwell, 30 years ago. Late fall, that specific bang and rattle of a screen door that needs the hook latched. My dad used to say that sound meant winter was practicing. I didn't look back. I just listened to it. Dale's phone buzzed on the console. He looked at it. Beverly Patton stood up at the auxiliary meeting this morning. Yeah, I said. Said she had a confession to make about her family. Yeah. Stories around town already. I figured. Dale set the phone face down on the console. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked out at the road where it bent around past the tree line and disappeared. You want to get something to eat? Yeah. Rosie's? Rosie's. He started the engine. Didn't pull out right away, just let it idle for a second, the way Dale does when he's deciding whether to say something. He decided not to. He pulled out onto the road. The grain elevator got small in the mirror. I didn't watch it go. I reached over and turned the radio on. Country station, something I didn't know. One of those songs that's been out 6 months and you still can't name it. Fine song, fine not to know it. I rolled the window down another inch, and the October air came in cold and sharp, smelling like cut corn and blacktop and whatever the county smells like when it's done with the season and just waiting now. I let it come in, didn't roll it back up. Dale drove. The rosary on the mirror swung once when he took the curve and then settled. We hit the highway and he got up to speed, and the engine evened out to that low, steady hum a Ram makes when it's comfortable. I thought about Sandra standing in the doorway of the apartment, looking at those 3 women. I thought about her face when she read the note. I know what Sandra looks like when she has to recalculate. I've seen it twice in 22 years. It's not a collapse, it's not tears, not right away. It's more like watching someone try to read a word they've never seen before, moving their mouth a little, not making a sound. Like the sentence has stopped making sense and she has to back up and find where it went wrong. She was going to have to back up a long way. I didn't feel good about that. I want to be honest about that part. 8 years is a long time for a woman to carry the wrong name for the thing that hurt her. I spent 8 years being the answer to a question she was asking about Greg Patton. That's not nothing. That's a real thing that happened to both of us. I'm not going to dress it up and call it justice and feel righteous about it. But I'm also not going to pretend I didn't feel something when I pictured Nora laying that filing down on the kitchen table. Nora doesn't do anything dramatically. She just sets papers down and waits. That's somehow worse than dramatic. And Dorothy, God. Dorothy handing Sandra that photograph with the full weight of 31 years of a reference librarian who has never once misplaced a fact. and Lori standing at the window, not moving. Lori has the particular stillness of someone who has been waiting a long time to stop moving. Those three women in that room were more than enough. I didn't need to be there. I was the least necessary person in that apartment by a pretty wide margin. And for once in my life, I was smart enough to know it. Dale hit the turn signal for the Rosie's exit. "You think she'll call you?" he asked. "Tonight? Tonight, tomorrow, whenever." "Yeah," I said, "she'll call." "What are you going to say?" I thought about it. "I don't know yet. Something honest." Dale nodded. He pulled off the highway and down the ramp, and we coasted through the light on Bridge Street and into the Rosie's lot. He found a spot near the door and cut the engine. Neither of us moved for a second. "For what it's worth," Dale said, "I think you handled this right. You put sugar in a man's gas tank." "I meant the rest of it." I laughed. It came out easy, which surprised me. "Yeah, I know you did." We went inside. Patrice was on. She saw us come in and grabbed 2 menus before we even got to the counter, set them down at our usual spots without asking. "Coffee?" she said. "Please," I said. "You eating or just sitting?" "Eggs over easy," Dale said. "Biscuits and gravy if you still have it." "We always have it." "Then that." She looked at me. "Same," I said. She wrote it down and walked off, and I looked at the counter and the formica and the little chrome napkin holder, and thought about how many times I'd sat in this exact spot in the last 2 weeks. I'd drunk enough coffee in this diner to float a small boat. Patrice had brought me pie I didn't order. I'd made phone calls in the parking lot that changed the shape of things. I'd eaten eggs and not tasted them, and eaten pie and tasted every bite. The coffee came. I wrapped both hands around the mug. Dale picked up his and said nothing, and I said nothing, and we sat there in the good kind of quiet for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. My phone lit up on the counter. Sandra. I looked at it, let it go to voicemail. Not because I was punishing her, because I wasn't ready to be honest yet, and I'd told Dale I was going to say something honest, and I meant it. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, then the screen went dark. I picked up the coffee and drank it. Dale watched me not answer it. 4 hours, he said. What? That's how long since she walked into the apartment. You lasted 4 hours before she called. I thought you were going to say something meaningful. That was meaningful. 4 hours is a long time for Sandra to sit with something she can't organize. He was right. Sandra runs on information. She needs to sort it, file it, understand exactly where it goes. Walk her into a room with 3 women and a note that reframes 8 years of her own history, and she can't file any of it. She can't even start. That would have been its own kind of hard. I knew that. That's partly why I didn't go back. The eggs came. Patrice set them down and walked away without a word, the way she does, the way I've come to appreciate. Dale salted his without tasting first. I cut into mine and watched the yolk run. We ate. Somewhere around the second cup of coffee, Dale said, "You know what Mom asked me last week?" "What?" "She asked if you and Sandra were okay. I said I thought so." "When was this?" "Tuesday, before all of it." "What would you say now?" Dale chased a piece of biscuit around his plate. "I'd say you're okay. Sandra, I'm less sure about." "Yeah. She's going to be okay too, eventually." "I know. But not because of Greg. She's got to figure out what to do with Greg now. That's its own whole thing." He was right about that too. Lori was going to handle Greg through her attorney, and through Beverly, and through the insurance board violations Ray had found, and then chosen not to send. Someone else would send them eventually. These things have a way of surfacing on their own schedule, independent of what any one person decides to do with them. Greg Patton had been running a quiet double life for a long time, and he'd done it with the confidence of a man who'd never been caught at anything. Beverly making her confession at the auxiliary meeting this morning was the first crack in the foundation. Cracks don't stay small in small towns. Chillicothe is the kind of place where everybody's parents knew everybody's parents. The story was already around town. By the weekend, it would be everywhere it needed to be. I hadn't sent a single file. I just closed the laptop and covered my brother with a blanket and gone to bed. There's a version of this where I blow Greg Patton up completely. Personnel files, client data, insurance board violations, 3 separate email threads that would end careers and probably invite lawyers. I had all of it. My finger sat over that button for a long time. But Sandra's real fight was never with me, and that fight wasn't really mine to finish either. I found out I wasn't the villain in someone else's story. That doesn't make me the hero of it. It just makes me a guy who got 8 years of blame aimed at him by a woman who loved him once and got turned around somewhere in the middle and never found her way back. Greg's reckoning was coming regardless. I didn't need to be the one to deliver it. I just needed to step out of the way. I left the note because Sandra deserved to know the true thing. Not for her sake or for mine, just because it was true, and she'd been living without it for too long. The rest of it she'd have to work out herself. My phone lit up again, text this time. I picked it up. Sandra, I need to talk to you. I looked at it for a moment, set it face down. She texted, Dale said. He'd been watching. Yeah. You gonna answer it? Tomorrow. Okay, he nodded. That's fair. He signaled Patrice for the check. She brought it over and set it between us without comment. Dale grabbed it before I could. I got it, he said. Dale, I drove from Columbus twice in 2 weeks. Let me buy you eggs. I let him. We walked out into the October night. Cold now, properly cold, the kind that comes in off the fields after dark in late October and reminds you that November is not theoretical. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead. Dale's Ram sat under one of them, the Ohio mud still on the wheel wells, the rosary just visible through the windshield. We stood there for a second before getting in. Neither of us was in a hurry. You gonna be all right in the apartment? Dale asked. Yeah. I can stay another night. You've been sleeping on my couch for a week. It's a good couch. It's a terrible couch, and your back has been bothering you since Wednesday. Thursday, he said. It got better. Go home, Dale. He looked at me for a moment the way he does when he's deciding whether to push it. He decided not to. Okay, he said. But you call me. I will. I mean, actually call me, not just text. I know what call means. You're a texter by nature, Ray. I'm being specific. I smiled. I'll call you. He unlocked the truck. I reached into the passenger side and grabbed my jacket off the seat and the printed cell carrier log that had started all of this. The page I'd folded in half and put in my jacket pocket like a receipt 2 weeks ago. I held it for a second. Then I set it back on the seat. I didn't need it anymore. Thanks, I said, for all of it. Dale shrugged. You're my brother. That was the whole answer, apparently. He got in and started the engine, and I stepped back, and he pulled out of the lot, and I watched the taillights until they turned onto Bridge Street and disappeared. I stood in the parking lot alone for a moment. Cold air, buzzing lights, the smell of coffee coming through the diner's exhaust vent. Then I started walking home. It was 6 blocks. I knew every inch of it. Chillicothe at 10:30 on an October night is quiet, in the way that towns get quiet when they've settled into themselves for the season. The storefronts were mostly dark. One bar on the corner had its neon on, casting a little red across the sidewalk. A dog barked somewhere in the middle distance, and then stopped. I walked. I thought about the apartment waiting for me, the kitchen where Dale had made eggs a week ago, and talked about the Dayton delivery job, and made me laugh for 90 seconds. The bathroom mirror with the crack in the lower left corner. The couch where Dale had slept for a week and left a dent in the cushion. The kitchen counter where Sandra's key used to sit, and where my note had been, and where Nora Stillwell had laid down a legal filing today and changed the official shape of things. The apartment was going to feel different now. Not better or worse, just different. The particular silence of a place that's finished being what it was. I climbed the stairs to the second floor. I unlocked the door. The kitchen light was on. I'd left it on when I left this morning. The coffee cup was on the counter where I'd left it. The apartment smelled like nothing in particular now. Just itself. I set my jacket on the chair and went to the counter and picked up my phone and looked at Sandra's text again. I need to talk to you. I set the phone down. I filled a glass of water and drank half of it at the sink and stood there looking out the dark window at Caldwell Avenue below. The street was empty. Dorothy's light was still on across the hall. She keeps late hours, always has. I thought about what I'd said to Dale, but I didn't know yet what I was going to say to Sandra. Something honest. Here's the honest thing. I still don't fully understand how we got here. I understand the facts of it. I have the email threads and the location logs and the parking stub and the photograph Dorothy took herself on a Tuesday in September. I understand what Greg Patton did in 2016 and why he probably did it, and how Sandra absorbed that loss and turned it into a grievance that had my name on it. I understand all of that now. What I don't understand is the 8 years in between. How two people who once knew how to make each other laugh can spend 8 years in the same apartment getting quieter and quieter until the silence is just furniture they've both stopped noticing. Maybe that's not something you understand. Maybe that's just something that happens, and the most you can do is stand in your kitchen at night and know it happened, and not lie to yourself about it. I finished the water, I rinsed the glass, I went to the window and looked down at Caldwell Avenue one more time. Somewhere up the street, outside where the neighborhood gave way to the older houses, a screen door closed. Not slammed, just closed, with that particular bang and rattle of a hook that needs latching. I knew that sound. I've been hearing it all week. She'll spend the rest of her life figuring out what to do with that note. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. I turned off the kitchen light. I went to bed.